Do you ever have one of those days when you wake up naked in your neighbor's flower bed covered in coyote semen? Wait, that's not right. Let's take that over again. Do you ever have one of those days where you saw a certain news headline and you were seized with an overpowering, nay, downright insatiable urge to break into a rousing chorus of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead? Or is that just me that happens to? So, as much of a somber duty as this is, as much as it gives me no pleasure at all to open the new year with a big, fat, delicious I told you so. I kind of told you so. I told you fine people some weeks ago that Claudine Gay was doomed, that her position at Harvard was untenable, that there would continue to be new plagiarism charges on a once or twice weekly basis, and that it was all over except the Harvard Board of Regents deciding just how many billions of dollars they were willing to lose and how much possibly irreparable damage they were willing to see done to the brand of their institution before they got around to doing the academic thing, no pun intended, and cutting bait on the wacky woke president who basically plagiarized her entire academic career and also happens to sparkly heart ethnic genocide. So for those fans keeping score at home, Claudine Gay finishes as the shortest tenured president in the history of Harvard, that august institution, just barely squeezing past the 6-month mark before being forced to resign in scandal and disgrace. I, for one, thought she still had one strategic avenue that was potentially open to her, which is saying a lot when you're a black woman named Gay. It's rather like winning the intersectional genetic lottery, but still, she could have taken the route, if she had really wanted it, of escalating the whole thing to a new level by cutting off her own leg and accusing her critics of attacking the disabled. But she opted not to go that route and chose instead to depart with just as much dignity as possible. Oh wait, she didn't do that. She actually issued the most long-winded, most impossibly self-righteous, most cartoonishly, shockingly hubristic statement that I think I've ever read from someone who is resigning in disgrace for egregious professional misconduct. Is there any trace of an apology here, or contrition, or even anything resembling basic self-awareness? No, there is not. It's almost like a window directly into the diseased mind of an untalented, unexceptional woman who's been habituated by her society into the belief that she can do whatever she wants, whenever she wants, to whomever she likes, and as long as she mouths the correct opinions, she is guaranteed continued upward mobility and fabulous material wealth to boot. And the Harvard regents might think they're off the hook now, that they can just ride out whatever is left of this storm and not have to face any difficult questions over what's taking place here. But I'm afraid that dog just ain't gonna hunt, fellas, because you all still need to explain to a whole lot of interested people what possessed you to hire a university president who was so eminently, spectacularly unqualified and unfit for purpose that she didn't even make it to the 200-day mark without burning down the reputation of your institution in a way that might not be fully recoverable for the next 50 or 100 years. It seems like the first thing one might do, and I don't have a fancy Harvard degree, so please bear with my flyover country ignorance here, that when you're considering a prospective university president, you might want to investigate her academic credentials for 5 minutes? And I don't know, make sure she's not a rabid Jew-hating serial plagiarist? Because if an independent journalist like Chris Rufo can find 50 or 60 brazenly obvious cases of plagiarism by this woman, I'm guessing the Harvard regents probably had that same information available to them, and they simply didn't wish to look at it. A black woman named Gay? Are you kidding me? It's like an intersectional 7-10 split. We can't not hire this chick. But I want to read out a couple of passages from this very, very insufferably long statement from Dr. Gay, and I was particularly interested with the way she opened it. Quote, "Dear members of the Harvard community, now is the winter of our discontent. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit." I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. Now here come the real quotes. Quote, "It is a singular honor to be a member of this university, which has been my home and my inspiration for most of my professional career. My deep sense of connection to Harvard and its people has made it all the more painful to witness the tensions and divisions that have riven our community in recent months, weakening the bonds of trust and reciprocity that should be our sources of strength and support in times of crisis. Amidst all of this, it has been distressing to have doubt cast on my commitments to confronting hate and to upholding scholarly rigor, two bedrock values that are fundamental to who I am, and frightening to be subjected to personal attacks and threats fueled by racial animus. End quote. And so there you go. There it is. She doesn't get to the end of paragraph 2 without playing the "I'm a victim of the white patriarchy" card, because of course she doesn't. Because yeah, Claudine, it's been really difficult for you to get a fair break in this country, hasn't it? You and Kamala both. So much oppression by the damn white patriarchy. What the hell do I know anyway? Maybe I'm just threatened by strong, powerful women of color who don't need no man for nothing. Just like Jasmine from Harmony Unleashed, who, despite being a creation of our AI robot overlords, is a more genuine human being than Claudine Gay ever will be. Jim Eagle, hit the music if you please, you magnificent son of a bitch. From atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where the judges also would have accepted "Another One Bites the Dust" as the name of the song I felt like singing when I saw that very, very sad news headline. Just another strong, powerful woman of color doing her best to hammer through those glass ceilings, only to get smacked back down by the long cock of white, patriarchal, heteronormative justice. It makes me sick, it does. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. Here's hoping everyone had an agreeable round of holiday merriment this year. I know I did. Or last year, as the case may be. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And something strange happened to me on Sunday night. I'm not really quite sure about how to go about processing it, frankly. I watched a movie on Disney Plus, a newer movie that I hadn't ever heard of, and you might want to sit down for this next part. I really enjoyed it. I know, it's a lot to take in. It's a contrary to everything I currently believe about the world, but here I am, and I really lived it. I'm here to tell you the story. Now, Free Guy is a picture in which Ryan Reynolds, who was also one of the writers and producers, plays an NPC who gains self-awareness and becomes the world's first sentient AI. And for the 70% of my audience who are over age 55, an NPC is a non-playing character in a video game. One of those people in the background who exist just to act out little pre-scripted routines and be the subject of murder and torture and abuse by the players of the game. This picture was supposed to come out originally, I believe, in Christmas of 2019. Then it gets delayed to spring of 2020. Then the wonderful, lovely China virus happens, and everything gets massively postponed again. So by the time the thing comes out, it's all the way in August of 21, like 2.5 years after the picture was in the can. It hardly gets any promotion. They give it a 5-week theatrical run, and they immediately dump it onto HBO Max. Sorry, Max. It's just Max now. It reminds me of when Ricky Schroeder became Rick. Okay, dude, I will say the new name, but it ain't my fault if I chuckle. And also a big part of that equation of awfulness is the acquisition of 20th Century Fox by Disney, which happened when this picture was, I think, just about to begin production. So amazingly, against all the odds, Disney keeps this movie on the docket, and they don't do anything to try and fuck it up and turn it into a cringy, preachy, ham-handed, moralizing sermon of suck that goes down about as satisfyingly as a fresh dog shit sandwich. Which, to my knowledge, is the first time that's ever happened since the advent of the woke Disney era. So, credit where it's due, I guess. But it ain't no lie to say this thing was weakly promoted when it was finally time to release it. Disney probably let it stay in production and didn't interfere with it very much because they thought it had a decent chance for a good box office run, which I think it probably did, all things being equal. But by the time we're over a year and a half into the China virus and the studios are just trying to clear out their backlogs and it's a project that originated in another studio, worse yet, this movie was never going to get the promotion that it probably warranted being given. Now, for my part, I didn't know anything about this movie, don't remember hearing anything about it when it was released. All I remember is having seen the thumbnail for it a couple of times when I happened to be browsing Disney Plus, looking for all the awesome new Marvel and Star Wars content. We might need the rim shot for that one, Jim Eagle. Thank you very much indeed, sir. But that's the same thing that happened this time. Ryan Reynolds had himself on my good side. Well, my better side, let's put it that way. Because I had just finished watching Deadpool 2. And it was better than I had remembered it being the first time I watched it, so I saw that little thumbnail down there in the watch this next section. And I said, okay, Ryan Reynolds, my fellow practitioner of pithy, vaguely inappropriate one-liners, my less handsome Canadian cousin, you've earned the opportunity. I'm going to watch this other film of yours right now because I am feeling in a generous mood. And if you want the one-sentence synopsis of what this movie is and what it's about, here you go. Picture what would happen if Pleasantville, They Live, The Truman Show, and Groundhog Day had a four-way bastard love child and it came out with the face of Ryan Reynolds. That's what Free Guy is. It recalls Pleasantville because the central crux of the narrative is fictional characters gaining self-awareness through their interactions with real people from the actual world. It recalls They Live because the animating event that sets the plot in motion is when our protagonist dons a set of magic sunglasses that enable him to perceive his surroundings as they really are. It recalls The Truman Show because it's got that sort of creepy, voyeuristic, revelatory moment where our hero realizes there are people watching him all the time whom he can't see and didn't ever know they were even there. And it recalls Groundhog Day because much of the first act is spent with Guy, the Ryan Reynolds NPC character, going through the same identical mundane set of motions and events of his everyday life over and over and over and over again. And as far as the actual story goes, well, it's one of the oldest stories in cinema, one of the oldest stories in fiction. It's the same narrative that's anchored most of the rom-coms made in the last 40 years. The kind of narrative you only really get in movies and TV sitcoms. For an attractive single man and an attractive single woman have been really close platonic friends and business partners for many years, and they've sort of got an unspoken thing for each other, but neither of them ever comes out and says anything until the plot of the movie happens, and they wind up, after all those trials and travails and tribulations, wind up happily ever after in each other's arms. And these might sound like criticisms that I'm issuing right now, as I'm saying the film is a synthesis of this movie and that movie and this movie and that movie, and the overarching story is a standard star-crossed lovers romance sort of a thing, but I don't mean them as criticisms, and here's why. Because if you write a good script and you tell a good story, it doesn't matter how derivative and unoriginal your movie actually is, because you make it original by the ingredients you choose to mix into the stew of artistic appropriation. All art comes from other art. The next truly original song or book or movie or story that somebody writes will be the first one. We have character archetypes and stock narratives and standard musical forms, not because any individual invented them, but because they emerged from out of the ether of our collective cultural memory from time immemorial. We've been telling the same story narratives and using the same character archetypes in the stories we tell since thousands of years before people had ever figured out how to write down the words they were speaking. And for that reason, I think some people missed the mark who insist that the main problem afflicting Hollywood in the present day and the film industry more broadly is a lack of originality problem, because I don't think that's the case. I think most people, movie fans, are perfectly happy to spend 2 hours watching a story where they know the male lead and the female lead are going to wind up together, just as long as it is a competently told story. Just as long as it's not a Trojan horse for beating the audience over the head with some lame-ass current-day political horseshit agenda. 10 minutes into this picture, I knew the male lead and the female lead were going to end up together. Did I care? Hell no, I didn't care, because the filmmakers told a compelling story that got us from point A to point B. And did I care that most or all of the story beats came from the 4 movies I listed earlier? Of course I didn't. Because they took those threads from those earlier movies, they tied them together in an interesting and perhaps unexpected way, and they attached them to a standard rom-com love story in a way that all added up to a satisfying conclusion in the end. This is not rocket surgery, Hollywood. You don't need 100,000 focus groups and computer algorithms to tell you this stuff that has always been right in front of your goddamn face. You can use things from other movies and we won't care. You can use the same set of half a dozen standard narratives and we won't care. Just don't insult our intelligence by copy-pasting old shit into new movies and expecting us to say, oh, look at the delicious member berries. I recognize that and I know what that is and I know what that is. Because that's not filmmaking. That's fucking pandering. And that's the thing that makes your audience stay away. Again, none of this is complicated. But in Free Guy, they did have a bit of a screenwriting conundrum that I thought they got themselves out of in a pretty impressive way, actually. So Ryan Reynolds is the NPC who starts gaining self-awareness when he first encounters the female lead, played by Jodie Comer. But the whole narrative thrust of the story says that Millie, the female lead, has to wind up together with the other computer programmer guy with whom she is star-crossed lovers. So the NPC, the Ryan Reynolds character, he's hopelessly in love with Millie, and so is the other guy, secretly, the guy who actually exists. But in terms of the narrative, you run the risk of having it come off looking like a love triangle where somebody has to get jilted in the end. Namely, the NPC who doesn't actually exist. And they chose an interesting way of getting around that, I thought, which has the dual effect of leaving open the question of whether the Ryan Reynolds NPC actually gained self-awareness or was just fulfilling his programming. And it just now occurs to me that that's also the open question that arises at the end of Star Trek the Motion Picture. So I am adding a fifth film to the earlier list of derivative sources. Because it gets explained to us in the end that Ryan Reynolds was programmed to think Jodie Comer was the world's perfect girl because that's what the guy who wrote his code also believed. And they tie it all up in a nice little bow with this line where Ryan Reynolds says, "Maybe I'm not a sentient AI. Maybe I am a love letter to you." And somewhere out there is the guy who wrote it. And boom, there it is, Bob's your uncle. Engaging story concludes in an emotionally satisfying way. All the characters get a happy ending. Nobody has to get cucked. The audience walks out with a smile on their faces. And nobody even called anybody a racist. Now, if anybody else out there has seen the picture and wants to compare notes, do feel free to drop a comment down below. Would love to hear it. And if you haven't seen it, the best thing I can say is this movie carries the Curmudgeon seal of approval. I give it 2 thumbs up and a respectful hat tip. Thanks very much indeed for watching. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. See you next time. Do not comply. Shit, I need a new closing gesture. Get off my lawn!